Welcome to this APC tutorial where today we'll take a look at a real-life example of a referral report that my colleague was very unfortunate to receive a few years ago after sitting their APC final assessment. And I think a lot of the information and feedback highlighted within the referral report will be really insightful and hopefully help a lot of people learn from some of the common mistakes that can happen during the APC process. For example, the referral report that we'll take a look at in more detail did highlight that the candidate was under the word count by approximately 10%, so not a huge amount, but the report does actually highlight the importance of really trying to maximise the 3,000 word count without going over, which in principle, to my knowledge, isn't contained in any of the RICS candidate guidance documents. So this is just an example of some of the lessons learned that we can take from having a look at the referral report. I really hope you find this video useful, and I really think the learnings from this video will improve your own chances of passing the APC first time. Whilst I can't claim to be an RICS assessor or expert, I'm only speaking from my own experience of the APC process and my experience having helped a number of colleagues pass their APC over the last 5 years. So I really hope you find this video useful. I am going to try and post APC video tutorials and mock interviews every week to this channel, so please subscribe to receive ongoing APC support and post any questions you have in the comments section below. The notes to this presentation are also available to download from the link in the description, along with some mock interview transcripts, which I hope you find of use. So without further ado, let's get into the main presentation. So before we get into the detail of the referral report example, I just wanted to touch on the actual purposes of the referral report, because I often think this can get overlooked by candidates. So if you are unfortunate enough to receive a referral report after sitting your APC final assessment, I think it's really important not to take these as a defeat or a reflection of that person not being worthy of being an RICS member. This really isn't the case, and the RICS are really behind you. They want you to continue down this road and to become a member. And whilst they're not a nice thing to receive, it's really important not to take these personally and to take it as a defeat. So in summary, the referral report is there to give the candidate some really prescriptive guidelines about what they can correct and the corrective measures that they need to put in place the next time they sit their APC. So before we have a look at the actual referral report, let's just try and touch on some of the key mistakes that can result in a referral report being issued. So one of the key reasons that the RICS cite as being a reason that a referral report is issued is a lack of knowledge, so a lack of level 1 understanding of the competencies that are specific to your pathway. It could also be down to a lack of experience that you've demonstrated, so your real life day-to-day surveying experience may not be coming across as strongly as it should do, either within your summary of experience or within the final assessment interview. Another reason is a lack of demonstrating the advice that you've provided, so a lack of evidencing that you've achieved the level 3 competencies where you've provided helpful and best practice advice to your clients. It could also be issued for not following best practice guidance, for a breach of global professional and ethical standards, not adhering to the RICS process, a lack of knowledge of your own submission document that you've put forward, an error contained on your submission documentation, and the referral report, as I've said, is really there to highlight your next steps and corrective measures, and it has to be said that the pass rate on sitting the APC second time around after receiving a referral report is much higher, and this is because the candidate knows the areas that they need to address. And the referral report is there also to guide the new panel on what corrective measures the candidate needed to take. So it's really important, as I say, not to take these as a defeat if you do receive a referral report. So really try and stick with it and just take this as part of the process and tick off the corrective measures that are contained in the referral report. Before we get into the detail of the referral report in this case, I just wanted to touch on a brief background of the profile of the candidate. I won't reveal their identity for obvious reasons, but having known the candidate really well, they were considered to be a very skilled and experienced quantity surveyor with around 4 years post-graduation experience. They had worked in the rail sector in the UK for the period of their structured training, and they were somewhat specialised in the rail sector. They were thought to have a very solid case study example, a solid presentation to back up the case study. They'd also been backed by their counsellor and supervisor as being ready to sit the final assessment. They were also very committed and hardworking and were undertaking regular Q&A practice. Unfortunately, they did fall down on the day due to some very common mistakes that I feel are very easy to correct, which we'll touch on. They were also very committed to practicing their presentation, and on the day the report even acknowledges that they delivered a very good presentation. So now that we've discussed a profile of the candidate, let's first of all take a look at the referral report in more detail. So this is the referral report example. Obviously it's specific to the quantity surveying and construction pathway, but I do think a lot of the lessons learned within this report will benefit many candidates out there about to sit their APC or working towards becoming a chartered member. So the first key mistake that the RICS highlight is that the declaration is contained within their case study and their submission documentation, and it wasn't needed to be in this case, and that's really highlighted to the assessors that the candidate maybe isn't familiar with the RICS candidate guide. So the declaration is no longer required as part of your case study or as part of your submission document. This is a legacy of what the APC process used to ask you to include. So it was a declaration that the work submitted was a reflection of all your own work and involvement, and that's no longer needed. But in this case, the inclusion of that declaration didn't convey the right message to the assessors because it communicated that the candidate maybe wasn't familiar with the RICS candidate guide. The second key mistake I think we can really take from reviewing the referral report is that the candidate in this case didn't maximise the use of the 3,000 word count. I think this is a really key lesson because the RICS do clearly set out in the candidate guide that under no circumstances are you to exceed the 3,000 word count for your case study. If you do this, the RICS can reserve the right to cancel your APC final assessment interview. So it's really key that you never exceed the 3,000 word count for the case study. There's no guidance out there though to say that you should be within a certain parameter of the 3,000 word count. So in this case, the candidate is 250 words below that, and the APC assessors have again said that hasn't really conveyed the right impression, and that they may want to try and make use of those 250 words next time around. So I think the key lesson learned here is that you should really try to maximise the 3,000 word count where possible, but obviously under no circumstances should you go over the 3,000 word count. The third key lesson I'd just like to touch on is that on arrival to the candidate's final assessment interview, the candidate did pass over a sheet to the panel which was clarifying a correction to their summary of experience where they'd referenced a incorrect form of contract. So I think really this just highlights the importance of making sure that you get your case study and summary of experience documentation correct first time around, because I think turning up to the interview and having to hand over a sheet to the panel which was effectively the admission of an error really didn't do anything to encourage the confidence of the candidate there. So I think that really just highlights the importance of making sure that your summary of experience is correct first time around. The next key mistake we can highlight from the referral report is that the candidate was unable to demonstrate the achievement of level 3 core competencies within the project. And again, the case study really should be there to back up to the assessors that you have achieved the level 3 experience that's needed in each of the competencies. So again, it's really clear that you're putting your best foot forwards and really demonstrating that you are achieving the level 3 of each of your competencies. And as we go further down the report, we can see the areas that are deficient in this case. So first of all, looking at the mandatory competencies, you can see here that communication and negotiation was required at level 2, but the candidate on the day was only able to demonstrate level 1 experience. So I think this is something that's very easy to address. I think by having a clear negotiation process set out, for example, preparing for a negotiation meeting, collating all your correspondence and documentation for the meeting, holding the meeting in a calm environment and letting both parties have their say, having things that you can concede on and your non-negotiable items, and just being able to talk the panel through your negotiation and communication process is something that I think is really easy to achieve if you've practiced that Q&A beforehand, and you can talk the assessors through the process that you adopted. So I think these are things that are very easy to correct, but it more highlights the importance of Q&A practice. There are a lot of other Q&A practice videos and mock interviews on this channel, so I will include a link which can refer you to the Q&A practice on those videos. You can see again some more examples of where the candidate has failed to demonstrate the achievement at level 3 of the core competencies. Certainly when we look at the advice under procurement and tendering, the candidate was unable to demonstrate that they'd achieved that due to the client in this case always having a determined procurement route, and because of this the candidate unfortunately wasn't able to demonstrate that they'd advised the client on that particular procurement route. So these are all really just highlighting the competencies that were deficient, and again it really just highlights the importance to us that you have to be able to talk through your summary of experience with the assessors on the day and really demonstrate that you are achieving up to level 3 of the core competencies, which is all about advising and providing best practice advice to your client. The next mistake that was highlighted within the report was that the candidate only achieved the minimum of the CPD requirements, and I think in this case, whilst that wouldn't result in a referral of the candidate, it doesn't always convey the right sort of impression to the assessors if you're only doing the minimum required amount of training. So I think as a minimum, I would advise any candidate out there to try and undertake at least 55 hours CPD during their period of structured training, because again, doing the minimum doesn't always convey the right message to the assessors. One of the next mistakes that's highlighted within the report is that the candidate was unable to touch on the RICS Black Book suite of documents, which they are considered the RICS's flagship suite of documents, specific to the quantity surveying and construction pathway. So all of the documentation contained within this is specific to the candidate's pathway of quantity surveying. These are the RICS as best practice guidance notes, and certainly in this case the candidate should have been with this suite of documents. So I think that really highlights the importance of really making sure that you are aware of the RICS's suite of documents that are specific to your own discipline. The conclusion sets out the next steps that the candidate needs to take, which again, in this case, unfortunately, they were advised to undertake a new case study that would allow the candidate to demonstrate each of the level 3 competencies that are needed, and it also details the other next steps that the RICS candidate needs to take in terms of training and CPD requirements. So fortunately, the referral reports are very prescriptive, and they do set out the corrective measures that the candidate needs to take. So as a quick recap of the key mistakes contained within the referral report, first of all, it highlighted that the declaration was not required by the candidate. The critical analysis was significantly under the 3,000 word count, which didn't create the right message with the assessors. The CPD record provided only contained the minimum 48 hours during the period of structured training, which again didn't convey the right message to the assessors. The candidate wasn't familiar with the RICS Black Book documentation, which is the RICS best practice guidance note specific to their pathway, which again didn't convey the right message to the assessors. In this case, the candidate had acknowledged that they had made an error within their summary of experience. The case study failed to achieve level 3 of the core and mandatory competencies. The panel had also highlighted that the presentation was somewhat lacking in detail and clarity. And overall, the technical and optional competencies were considered to be deficient and not achieving the required level 2 and level 3. So now that we've highlighted some of the key mistakes contained within the referral report, we'll now talk about some of the remedies that can be put in place in order to try and avoid these mistakes, which I really do feel as though a lot of them can be avoided relatively easily. So the first mistake of including the declaration, I think that's again very, very easy to achieve. If you print out the RICS candidate guide that's specific to your pathway, whenever you're populating your summary of experience or your case study, that's a really useful document to have at your side, and you can make sure that you are adhering to the APC process on your pathway. And I think this mistake really highlights the importance of printing out that guide and really using that as your main reference point when populating the documentation that's needed. Mistake number 2 of being significantly under the critical analysis word count. Again, we really should make sure that we maximise use of the 3,000 word count where possible. But that said, under no circumstances should you be going over the 3,000 word count. The CPD record, as we've mentioned, was only provided to the minimum of the 48 hours during the period of structured training. So I think the key lesson learned here is that for any APC candidate wanting to become an RICS member, don't do the minimum amount of CPD that's needed. I would recommend aiming to try and demonstrate at least 55 hours for your period of structured training. The fourth mistake of not being familiar with the RICS Black Book documentation. Again, the key lesson learned here is that you, as a candidate, must know the RICS best practice guidance documents that are specific to your pathway. So the Black Book documents are specific to the QS pathway, but it's always worth going onto the RICS website and making sure that you are fully abreast with the best practice guidance notes. The candidate in this case, on mistake number 5, did acknowledge that they had populated an error within their summary of experience. And again, this really highlights the importance of getting the summary of experience right first time around. So wherever possible, try to make sure that your peers, that your supervisor and counsellor are checking the summary of experience in as much detail as possible, and really make sure that you've read through that you know the document inside out, and that it doesn't contain any mistakes that are going to trip you up during your final assessment interview.
The panel in this case acknowledged that the case study failed to achieve the level 3 competencies. And again, I think the key workaround here is that whenever you're thinking about a case study and a project for your case study, I would recommend printing out the list of competencies that are specific to your pathway. And as you read through your case study, you really should be ticking off as many of those competencies as possible, all the way up to level 3. If there are any competencies that you can't demonstrate within your case study, then I really would recommend thinking about switching to another project where you can demonstrate as many of those competencies as possible, all the way up to level 3. The candidate in this case failed to demonstrate the core competencies that were needed. So again, this really just highlights the importance of that Q&A practice, and going through each of the competencies and your summary of experience in detail, trying to think about the potential questions and answers that you could give around those competencies to make sure that you can demonstrate level 3 experience of advice provided. As we touched on in this case, when it came to procurement and contract advice, the candidate advised the panel that their client always use the same form of procurement and always use the same form of contract. So unfortunately in this case, they were unable to demonstrate that they'd advise a client on those core competencies. So the key here is really making sure that you can demonstrate you provided best practice and helpful advice to your clients. The presentation was lacking in detail and clarity. So again, this really highlights the importance of using very prescriptive and very reflective terminology. So certainly in the presentation, you should be putting forward your key issue and what you did to resolve that issue. So it should be very reflective. There should be no room for ambiguity within that presentation, and you should be clarifying each of the key points, whether that's what the key issue was, what you did to rectify the issue. So there really should be no room for ambiguity or lack of detail or clarity within your presentation. So I think the key bit of advice here is to try and make sure that you practice your presentation as much as possible. I would recommend practicing at least 20 times before you have your final assessment. That's also practicing the timing of the presentation, and making sure that when you pitch your presentation in a practice environment, check with your audience that they were fully understanding of the topics that were discussed, and really making sure that there's no confusion or ambiguity within your presentation. So I think this mistake really just highlights the importance of practicing your presentation in front of your counsellor and supervisor, and making sure that there's no ambiguity or lack of detail in there. The mandatory competencies, again, were not demonstrated to the required level, which again really just highlights the importance of Q&A practice around those areas. Certainly for things like communication and negotiation and health and safety, you should have a very well thought out negotiation process in your head that you can talk through with the APC assessors on the day, and those issues really shouldn't be too hard to address. It's really, as I say, all about the Q&A practice and making sure that you can talk through your process and what you did very concisely and very clearly with the assessors. The technical and optional competencies, again in this case, were not highlighted as being achieved to the correct level. So again, be really sure to try and make sure that your summary of experience does allow you to demonstrate level 2 experience within those optional competencies. I really hope that you found this APC tutorial useful. As I say, I will be posting weekly mock interviews and APC tutorials to this channel, so please subscribe for ongoing APC support and post any queries that you may have in the comment section below. Thank you for watching this video, and I really hope